Hi, I'm Jen Gaster from HR Heads, and I'm welcoming you to our very first Recruiters Insight. Following a poll that we published on LinkedIn last week, you guys have voted overwhelmingly 40% to have my insight on what Post Brexit HR is going to look like. I think following Theresa May's crushing defeat in the House of Commons earlier this week, we're in a position perhaps where we still don't know if Brexit is a reality or not. Either way, there's much concern about what's going to happen. The Employment Secretary has warned that the labour crisis will be significant if we leave without a deal, and equally the CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, Neil Carberry, has suggested that businesses are going to suffer tremendously if we don't get this sorted. Whatever does happen, we are sure to face uncertainty and change, and we do know that change won't be swift. It'll be transitional, probably over a period of 2 years. That change, however, is going to result in significant workload for HR, and I'm here now to look at what that might be for them to face into in the coming years. So the first question post-Brexit for HR is undoubtedly legislation. Many of the EU critics cite red tape as being a factor that we'd be pleased to get rid of if we were to decouple. The reality, however, might not be so clear-cut. Many of the laws and legislations that we adopt and use at the moment are inbred through not just law, but also social policy. It's intrinsic in the way that we work. There are many rules and regulations around race, discrimination, employment protection that are regarded as the norm, and I think we are more aligned than people realise. If we were to leave the EU, we might actually join the EEA, the European Economic Area, and if we were to do that for our trade agreements, the reality is we would have to adopt some EU legislation as a counterpart to that. If this were to happen, the reality of legislation completely decoupling is non-existent, and we will end up being far more aligned than we think we might be today. The second question that HR is significantly going to face is that of immigration and the free movement of workers across the UK and the EU. Currently, we've got about 2 million EU workers who work very freely across the UK. Now, their status is pretty secure until the 2021 deadline of settled placement status. The question really rises beyond that when actually the new talent pool might not be able to come in so freely. We will potentially face the question of visas, and I don't know if we will look at having some visa system that has a points grading scoring system like that in Australia. And the question then will be how many of those workers meet that point system. Many of the EU workers in the UK at the moment actually do quite low-level jobs. Another consideration will be if we impose any restriction around EU workers in the UK, we're likely to have that reciprocated. So what implications will that have for UK workers wanting to work across Europe? Finally, technology. How, as a UK company with workers in multiple countries, will our technology be able to adjust from a payroll and legislation perspective to account for local legislation? That's a question where IA can certainly help us, but I'm not sure our technology is going to be quite there yet. The third consideration, and it's linked to the immigration and movement of workers, is ultimately the talent pool from which the UK PLC will be able to hire amazing people into the companies that they wish to work in. At the moment, I've already said the settlement and settled status means that the reality of change in the talent pool right now will be very little. However, post-2021, if an EU worker is not already in the UK, their right to work here will be subject to perhaps a visa and a point system coming in. The implication for human resources in that instance is going to be time and cost around managing that process, the right to work, all of the checks, and possibly incurred costs for businesses around sponsorship. That's something perhaps that hasn't been quantified as yet, but we can anticipate it as an HR professional in the future. We're also potentially going to face running operations with a reduced workforce. There is going to be a transitional phase, and it will be the smart and shrewd HR professionals who strategically plan for that survive it. But I suspect many businesses will find themselves in a position where they have gaps in the workforce, the talent market is already tight, and that's only going to increase. In terms of looking at how our students come through, we have many students in the UK universities that come from the European Union. And actually, the universities are instrumental to our economy. They currently contribute £73 billion to the UK economy, of which £3.7 billion comes directly from that student pool. We need to understand what their right to study will be and how easy we will facilitate that, because the implications to the costings and fundings of the Russell Group universities will be significant, and it will impact on their ability to collaborate and offer cutting-edge R&D that keeps the UK at the top of the worldwide market. So what does all of this mean for the role of an HR professional moving forward? Well, I think it's fair to say that the Brexit vote is not so much about the UK leaving the European Union, but very much about how people fit into a new political reality. If we face restrictions on EU workers, for HR that's going to create potentially high employee turnover and a very uncertain workforce. And the HR's job is going to be about steadying the ship. How do we ingratiate people to the business? How do we engage with them? How do we keep them there? And how do we promise them a future? And that's fundamentally where we've got to be thinking today. 9 out of 10 EU workers in research have admitted about being worried about their future. HR are going to have to work really hard to just reassure their employees that that future is solid. Whatever happens next, Brexit will undoubtedly create more work for human resources. Those that are likely to survive the next few years through to 2021 are the ones that can strategically plan, who can organise and work agilely and flexibly, and be very capable at working with ambiguity, because that's the only surety we really face through to the end of 2021. Thank you for listening to our first Recruiters Insight. I hope you found that to be insightful and interesting. I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts and experiences on it. I'd also ask you to look out for our next month's poll. We will put up 4 subjects for you to vote on, and I will then bring to life what the Recruiters Insight is on each of those. Equally, if you have subjects that you'd be really keen to hear about, please do drop me a note and make sure you vote in our next poll. Many thanks.